It's my pleasure now to introduce my friend and colleague, Stewart Wallis, who's, he objected a little bit to it being called a world-renowned economist up front. I think that's because he considers himself more of a recovering economist. But in fact, Stewart is very well known and is highly accomplished in many areas. He worked in East Africa with the World Bank and got a great deal done for people there. He worked for Oxfam and received awards for his work, and is the first and only so far executive director of the New Economics Institute in London, which has not only really posed significant challenges to the status quo economic thinking, but accomplished stimulated results that probably pose an even greater challenge, because standard economists say that a lot of the things that new economists believe in, they say they fine, but you can't do it. And when we can do it, it changes the paradigm bit by bit. So anyway, with that, I would like to welcome Stewart.
Thank you so much, and it's great to be here. And one thing I'm really sad about is that I'm only here for a very short time, but I've got to go back to England tomorrow. But I made one promise. I'm going to take the English weather you're having back with me. So I'm going to work on that, okay? What I want to tell you about tonight is why we need a total transformation of our economy and why it's the problem. And it's going to be a tale of two halves. The first part, I make you gloomy. And please keep staying. Don't walk out at that point, because I'll be worried about you. Then we get to the positive news. And basically it is positive, but we have to look at what's happening and see why we need that change. And we're calling it a great transition. We need a total change to our economics. But before I get into economics, and you have to bear with me, I am a recovering economist, and I'll try not to do too much tech stuff, but do wave things or throw things if I do. I want to start, though, with that humble rodent, the hamster, that's a favourite cuddly household pet. Now, pretty unknown fact, and this is part of the useless information I've got my brain stuffed with, a hamster doubles its weight every week from birth to puberty. But very luckily, it stops at puberty. It doesn't grow anymore. If it carried on growing at that same rate, at 1 year old, it would weigh 9 billion tons. And it would eat every day the whole world's grain supply. And the reason I tell that little fable is because certain things are impossible. There was a quote from an earlier economist who said, "Anybody who believes that we can have infinite growth in a finite world is either a fool or an economist." And unfortunately, there's quite a lot who fit in both categories. So what I'm going to talk about is what's wrong. And one of the ways I'm going to sum it up is 4 U's. The world we're living in and the economic system is unsustainable, it's unfair, it's unstable, and it's making us unhappy. Those are those 4 things. Now start with the unsustainable. Put very simply, we as a species are running out of planet. The planet will survive, but in terms of what we use from it, that won't. And it's not just we're using too much of the atmosphere's holding capacity for carbon dioxide, though that's true, and in a minute we're on path for about a 4 degrees temperature rise compared to pre-industrial levels, which will cause all sorts of problems. So it's not surprising that the degrees of storms, floods, what's happening in the Mississippi now, we can't prove that's all connected, but it's quite likely to be. I wouldn't like to take the bet the other way. We don't know yet, but we know we're setting ourselves up for trouble. More New Orleans, more Katrinas. But it's not just climate. Everybody thinks that's the main problem, that's what we hear. But actually, we're running out of fish stocks. The bee population is declining dramatically, and with it, pollination systems. Coral reefs are being degraded. Fresh water is becoming scarcer and scarcer, and we're likely to have wars in the future about fresh water. And we've had some already in some parts of the world. So whichever way you look at it, the life support systems, the very things we depend on for our survival as a species, as humans, are being degraded. And there's a very crude term about how many planets' worth of resources we're using. And if you're using one planet's worth of resources as a planet, it means that you're just about regenerating the planet's resources each year. You're just about using up what the planet can put back for us. Because there's the natural resource systems are very good at regenerating themselves if they're not too messed around with. Back in 1980, or about 1983, we were using, as humankind, one planet's worth of resources. Now, we're using about 1.4 planets' worth of resources. We've nearly gone up 50% just in those 30 years. So it's massively fast change, dramatically fast change. And that's serious. And if we carry on as we are, it's incredibly serious. If everybody lived and consumed at the rate Americans do, and that's consuming, not just consuming, but it's consuming non-renewable materials, resources of whatever type, we would need 5 planets. If everybody consumed at my country's level, we'd need 3 planets. Of course, we've only got 1. So we're in a serious place where we're running down our earthly overdraft in a massive way and not repaying the gift that we're given by nature in any way that anybody would see as reciprocal at all. That's the unsustainable. What about the unfair? Well, at the beginning of the 20th century, the ratio between the top fifth of humankind, the richest fifth of humankind, and the poorest fifth of humankind was about 7 to 1. So the richest fifth were about 7 times richer than the poorest fifth on the planet. At the beginning of the 20th century. At the end of the 20th century, it was 75 to 1. A massive, huge shift. So what you can see is these aren't just little incremental shifts on either how we're using up our planet or what's happening to inequality. These are exponential shifts that are going up far more rapidly than you expect, and something totally different from human history beforehand. We've done something very different in the last 120, 150 years than we've ever done before as a species. And obviously, these things are made worse by the fact that population is going to grow by about another 3 billion people on the planet, but everybody says it's population. Well, it is a problem. Wouldn't pretend otherwise. But you've got to realize that the average American consumes about 100 times the resources that the average Ethiopian does. So it's not just about the numbers of people on the planet, it's also about how much they're consuming. And that consuming amount is actually a much bigger factor than the sheer numbers. But going back to the unfairness, another way of putting it is, over the last 25 years, there's been an increase in wealth for Americans. And of that increase in wealth, 80% has gone to what proportion of the American population? What do you think? The top 1%. 80% to just 1%. Or another way of putting it, the 400 richest Americans are as rich as the 155 million poorer Americans at the bottom of the income scale. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at not just something a little bit out of kilter. And you know, there's this wonderful phrase, trickle down, that's used about economics. The idea is, the rising tide will take up all boats. But actually, forget that analogy. It's been a very good one that's been sold to you. Forget the tide taking up the boats. Think more of a hoover. And what's being hoovered up from all of you. That's what's happening. It's a hoover up, not a trickle down. That's what's going on. So you really need to see it. Think of that. Think of Hoover now. So that's the unfair bit. What about the unstable bit? Well, any natural system is designed by nature to be both resilient and efficient. It needs to be both. Both those things are normal. We've designed our economics, foolishly, just to be efficient. So you make things just in time. You have everything connected electronically, so what happens in one place shoots across to somewhere else. And it's a very unstable system. It's like electricity without the fuse box. And so it's not surprising the subprime crisis in the Midwest of the US has rippled across the financial system and nearly caused the ATM machines to close down in Europe or other parts of the world. It's not surprising we keep getting more and more currency crises because the whole thing has been designed for efficiency and not resilience, and as a result it's neither. It's not efficient to keep falling over. And some of you may know why San Francisco burnt down in the 1904 earthquake. I think it was 1904. It was because at those days it was more cost effective to fill up the fire hydrants. You call them fire hydrants here? These tanks you put in the middle of the block intersections with water in if the case is a fire. It was cost effective, they'd worked out, to fill it from one place. Now that's fine if you just have a fire somewhere. If you have an earthquake, just only needs one bit to rupture, all the water pours out of the whole thing. So when the San Francisco earthquake happened, the whole place, a lot of it burnt down because there was no water. So that was a case where it was more cost effective to have it all connected, but actually very stupid, and we've learned on that. We don't have all our hydrants filled up separately now. We haven't learned how to do our banking system, our economic system, anything like that. So we need a very different way of looking at it. And lastly, that issue of unhappy. And this is the bit that's really silly. Because not only are we doing all those difficult things, actually we're not making ourselves any happier. And that's daft when you think of it. If you actually look at measures of well-being or happiness for America over the last 40 years, they've gone down. In my own country, they've flatlined. And for many people on the planet, more and better have parted company. More income isn't equaling better lives. For many people, it does. If you're poor or something, of course it does. But if you're past a certain income level, it's not that huge, more income does not necessarily mean better lives or greater happiness. The connection's different. So when you start adding it all up, we're running faster and faster. I sometimes think of an analogy like a hamster wheel, whizzing round and round. Burning up our planet as we go, causing lots of unfairness, and that unfairness doesn't just translate into just something that's a bit awkward. There's huge amounts of evidence that the degree of unfairness, inequality, leads to more social problems. So those societies that are more unfair have more crime, more drugs problems, more unwanted teenage pregnancies. You name the problem, they have it. And America is one of the most unfair of the richer nations, and it's not surprising there are serious social problems. Those things tie to each other. So we're running faster and faster, burning up our planet, causing all these social problems and unfairness, having a system that keeps falling over, which is pretty scary because people don't know whether they're going to lose their jobs or whatever happens. And it's not even making us any happier. Now that's really stupid, isn't it? That's the bad news. We're in a very stupid place. And it comes down to economics. And I think Bill Clinton should have said, instead of his famous soundbite, it's the economy stupid, what he should have said, it's the economy that's stupid, stupid. And that's what I certainly would say.